Very pumped to get back into the great sport of rugby sevens on the show today. It's a sport that we haven't really had a lot of people for a big deep dive interview, and we're going to change that today with a man who, let's say, is a legend of this sport. He is a triple Olympian, the vice captain of the Australian rugby sevens team. This man has done it all in the sport, and I'm so excited to learn a little bit more about his career and the sport of rugby sevens. It's a pleasure to welcome to the show Henry Hutchison. First of all, Henry, welcome to Off The Podium.
Thanks, Ben. Really excited to be here. I'm jealous that you're calling in from New York tonight. So, I'm stuck here in Sydney, but keen to have a chat.
Well, I'm excited to have a chat with you because you and I met, was it about 6 or so weeks ago? It was at the Olympians, New South Wales Olympians dinner in Sydney, where you were like the MC, I guess. You were the host. You were owning that room. You were doing fantastic, and had a bit of a chat with you, invited you on the show, so I'm excited to be here. But first of all, great job that night. I feel like you should be in my chair right now, Henry. You've got a future doing that sort of stuff, I think.
Oh, no, you're gassing me up, putting some GST on that. But, yeah, it was a great night at the, I think it was a sales club in Kirribilli.
It was, yeah.
I think that's where it was. It was a fantastic venue. But I was actually stitched up a little bit. I was told I was going to be doing a bit of a roving mic 2 hours before the event. So I was kind of hastily writing notes on the people I was interviewing through the dinner, trying to make it look like I was paying attention, so to speak, but really I was on Google trying to get a bit of background on, athletes from 1964. So, I was going to say, forgive me if I don't know who they were. I was, still 40 years from being born.
Well, I think you did a fantastic job. And the beauty of Google, right? That you can sort of just jump on there and kind of do it. And then you come here and I've got like a page worth of notes and hopefully a few extra screens open that can make me sound smart. So,
it makes us all sound like experts.
Right. That's the thing, right? Fake it till you make it. As long as we sound like we know what we're talking about, then that's hopefully all that matters. But I'd love to learn, Henry. Let's go back to the start. Rugby itself. How do you get involved? You're a Sydney boy, so obviously it's kind of ingrained in the school system a little bit. But kind of what was it about rugby that sort of tickled your fancy versus some other sports maybe that you could have gone through?
Yeah, I think I was born in Bronte, so. Rugby was definitely kind of in the community where I grew up. My family, my dad and his grandpa, they all played rugby. So rugby was the sport of choice at home, kind of by default. But I guess it was really the 2003 Rugby World Cup where Australia, they hosted it and they got all the way to the final. I vividly remember Johnny Wilkinson slotting that drop goal to break all of our hearts. And I just remember being quite captivated by that whole World Cup, by the Wallabies. There were such big names in that team, like the likes of Matt Giddo, Stephen Larkham, Wendell Sailor, Lottie Takiri, all these guys who I've had the pleasure of meeting actually through my career and playing with a few. So that was probably the catalyst of me falling in love with the game. And from then it was just, everything rugby, just getting in and playing as much as I can from a youngster. And I loved it and I've continued loving it ever since.
I love hearing that about 2003 because, I remember that vividly too. I'm about 10 years older than you, Henry, and I'm from Tasmania, so rugby's not really our sport, but it captivated the nation. And this is only a few years after Sydney. We're sort of obviously very into the big sports there. But those names you mentioned and just that final and just everything around that period. I remember you go to Best and Less and everything was like Rugby World Cup merchandise. I think everyone had that rugby top, that one that everyone was wearing. And you're about 6 then? So you're at that perfect age where you're kind of absolutely enamored by all this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Rugby was really at the pinnacle of Australian sport then. And I think they had a bit of a golden period of success and relevance. And I guess that's what you get when you host these massive sporting events on home ground. And it's so important to bring these events back to Australia. So the Rugby World Cup, the Brisbane Olympics, all these events that are the British and Irish Lions that are coming to Australia in the next couple of years is going to be great for Australian sport, but rugby and also rugby sevens.
Did you play many other sports or was it just purely rugby?
No, I did them all. I think everyone starts off playing soccer. I remember playing soccer down at Queen's Park. and I loved it. Moved to Melbourne for a little while, so played some AFL. Even did a season of playing European handball at
Oh,
school.
wow.
Just anything really. A lot of gymnastics growing up, little athletics. So I think it was anything really for my parents to run the energy out of my siblings and I. So when we get home at night, we'd just fall asleep and not fight each other.
I've got to bring up the handball because big handball fan on this show. I mean, what's that like playing European handball, particularly in Australia, because it's such a tiny sport in this country?
Yeah, it was pretty rogue. It was through school. I actually went and watched the European handball at the Paris Olympics, but we can cover that a little bit later. But I was like, I've got to go see this. I actually used to play. But yeah, I think I was at St Kevin's in Melbourne for a few years, and they did different sports in each term, and you'd go and play other schools on a Wednesday afternoon. And term three was a little bit of a there's no rugby, there's no AFL, there's no swimming, there's no athletics. It was kind of this, or soccer, this kind of middle term where there wasn't many sports that, you'd commonly choose. And all the lads, or all of my mates decided, how about we just stack the European handball team and basically got the first rugby and AFL team all playing handball. And we just absolutely
Wow.
went to town.
That's
It was
crazy.
super fun, super fun.
Yeah, I remember like we did it a little bit like similar to that. You have like in health class like this week we're doing this sport, this week we're going to try that. I remember we did like a week or two of European handball like in Tasmania, and it was just fun. It was just such a fun sport, and I saw it in Paris too. Right, it's just
It was super physical.
yeah, right. Like it's crazy to watch live. Like it's such an amazing sport, which I wish we would do more in Australia.
I think the coach she was this European handball ex-professional women's player from like Bulgaria or somewhere. This big woman, pretty scary as well. I remember it pretty clearly. But she was just like so stoked to have all these like um, keen, athletic kind of like 13, 14-year-old guys. She'd probably, I'm not sure, I don't want to make any judgments, but probably hadn't coached, that before. And we were all just ready to rip in and play for her. And I think we just flogged every team by about 20 points.
Wow, wow. Well, I tell you what, I know a few people in the system. If you want to get to Brisbane and switch
flip back.
sports, and you never know, that could be a bit of a story. And I get gold in LA and then switch to handball for Brisbane. That's
That'd be a
part
story.
there. That would be, wouldn't it? What's the rugby scene like in Melbourne at that period? Because obviously, people who maybe not be familiar with Australian sporting codes, Melbourne obviously very central on Australian rules football, Sydney much more
Yeah.
on rugby. But did you find it challenging to get involved in rugby in a city where maybe that's not its focus compared to some other codes?
Not challenging because it was probably the start of the rise of rugby in Melbourne. I think the year that I left Melbourne to come back to Sydney, the Rebels, it was their inaugural year, the inception of the Rebels, which the Super Rugby Club. So rugby, the rugby community had probably had 5 years prior from me moving to Melbourne of like starting to get competitive, and the Islander community had really started tapping into it. So it was starting to actually get quite strong. And, like my state team in under 12s, about 7 or 8 of them are playing professionally now still. So one of them is captain of the Scotland team, Sione Tupilutu. Bobby V's just won John Eels medal 2 years in a row playing for the Wallabies. That's just to name a few. Like we had a very strong age group of players when I was down in Melbourne playing. So, yes, it's definitely the little brother to AFL, and AFL's religion down there, but there was still a strong community and some really good talent playing down in Melbourne. Now Melbourne Rebels aren't in Melbourne anymore. The business just didn't quite work. I'll be interested to see what happens to that community down there. But yeah, with the Islander community down there, there's always some pretty good talent, floating around.
Because I think that I'll speak on behalf of somebody from an AFL state. Is the naivety is that we look at, say, the NRL rugby league, then we look at the Wallabies Super Rugby Union, and to us it's like, well, if you're a fan of one, you're a fan of the other. You intersect, like they're very similar sports. But I found living in Sydney, that wasn't the case. You went to NRL and you would say like, oh, I'm going to a Super Rugby game. They'd almost look down on you, and you'd go to a Super Rugby. Like it seems like it's a big separation now. I don't know if that's Sydney. I don't know if that's modern times. But is that a thing, say, like in Melbourne, where they maybe look at the Melbourne Storm and think, well, it's the same as the rebel. Like there's not that education there. They realize that they're two very distinctly different sports.
Yeah, you're probably right. And they are very different, and they probably are quite segregated. However, that's probably not a good thing. I think we should try and merge the talent, share resources, and just try and grow both the games together at the same rate, or all three. Like when you got AFL, rugby, rugby league, soccer, cricket, all competing over the same kind of talent pool. You spread yourselves thin, and maybe rugby unions on the backhand of that at the moment. So instead of kind of positioning yourselves as completely different sports, we should just be positioning ourselves as, substitute sport or similar sports that you can do both, you can play both, and enjoy both as a player and a spectator.
Definitely agree with that. And, there's always a sport sometime a year we can watch and enjoy. And, that's kind of the beauty of it, right? Like it kind of spreads out that way. Just quickly on, I mentioned Sydney. I saw in another podcast you mentioned that even as I think 3, when Sydney was on, that's how old you were still very much into the Olympics. Did that sort of whet your appetite for an Olympics, and did that kind of set you on a path where you thought like, hey, I'd love to go to an Olympics one day?
Yeah, definitely. This got brought up a bit last year in the team. Like, what's your earliest memory of the Olympics? And the boys around my age, some of us said 2000, some of the boys said 2004. The boys that said 2004 thought we were lying, and there's no way that we could remember the 2000 Olympics because we're only 3 years old. But, I vaguely can. I remember making like paper mache fake Olympic torches at school and taking them home and running down our corridor and pretending I was, Kathy Freeman or, lighting the torch. So I can remember that quite vividly. Now, that might have been a year later. I'm not too sure. But I remember that Sydney 2000 Olympic buzz and the schools and the primary schools getting so involved. I remember going out to Homebush on these super hot days and watching the athletics, and that kind of memory at a young age then made me interested in the 2004, the 2008, 2012 Olympics and so forth and so on. So that Olympic Sydney movement coupled with, I guess, the 2003 Rugby World Cup movement combined, I guess, was the start of my love for rugby and the Olympics.
Because I can imagine it's a different path for you because growing up and when you're getting involved in rugby, sevens, of course, wasn't an Olympic sport. I don't think it was added till about 2012, 2013. So I can imagine that when you're growing up, was it Wallabies or nothing, like Rugby World Cup, this was the pinnacle that you were aiming for at that point?
Definitely. I think up until about for me, up until 2015, 2016, I think at school, playing my rugby, going through my rep teams and school teams, it was still very much you just kind of play 15s. You're right, sevens was inducted into the Olympics in 2013, I think. And then after that, it started to become quite professionalised and its own kind of sport. But before then, it was just like a subsidiary of rugby union. And since then, they've kind of gone on separate paths. And when I left school, I was playing first grade for Randwick. And the coach of the sevens team at the time, I didn't know too much about the program, just said, hey, look, we really like you, think we'd be really suited. The Olympics are next year. We're going to offer you a 1-year deal. We'll see how you go. And then I guess that was it. I had a really good season, and so I went to the Rio Olympics, and, it's kind of been like that ever since.
Now you're triple Olympian, as we sit here and sort of talk to you around that, which
Olympian, yeah.
Triple Olympian. So you're what, about 17, 18? That's like a ridiculously young, right?
Yeah, I was young. I would have been 18, I think, at my first Olympics. So definitely the baby of the team. I remember being quite young in the team as well. I think the next youngest in the squad was around 24, 25 in that Olympic team. So that's still not massively old, but for that gap, it was quite a big gap. So, physically and mentally as a player. So I had to grow up. I had to, learn to live and deal with men. And, I had a few hard lessons early, but I guess that I'm paying the dividends of them now.
This might be the smartest or dumbest question I've ever asked, Henry, but I mean, like when you transition from 15s to 7s, what are the main things you've got to get used to, besides the fact there's literally half the people that you're playing with, of course, and it's faster and it's, shorter halves, things like that. But like, what are the biggest things you've got to, adapt your playing style to in the different form of the game?
Oh, we might not have it long enough. I might have to give you the list. It's so different now. The nuances of the game is really different. Like, the fundamentals are still the same. You need to be strong, fast, good in contact, catch pass. That they are all very similar. But then when you get into the nuances of both games at the top level, at the elite level, they're very, very different. The breakdowns are very different. The way you defend is different. The way you attack is different. Being able to go to contact at the right time, how to avoid contact, the tactics is different. The time frame, the pressure on the body. It's the more sevens has become professionalized, the more it's people have had full careers being a sevens player, and there's more money in the game for players to say, hey, I can just do this for 10, 15 years. The more the game's changed, and it's harder to transition across the two, because the fine details of the sport are vastly different.
Do you find it's similar in a way to how when 2020 started in cricket, that was almost looked upon as a bit of a gimmick, bit silly, bit fun, but then obviously that's become itself its own beast, and we're about to see that added to the Olympics in a few years. I mean, is that a similar thing that you feel sevens was seen as a bit of a gimmick, but it took the Olympics to kind of make people take it a little bit more seriously?
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to explain it. And you see, like, some of the test stars that household names would expect to be, who are so good, playing those 5 days tests and the Ashes and all those games. You'd expect it to just be the starting 2020 team as well, but sometimes their skills don't correlate. And then it's vice versa the other way. Some of the Big Bash superstars or the 2020 superstars, they're not good at staying in that test team. So it's interesting to see that they probably have a similar dynamic in them being two different sports. Of course, there's the exceptions to the rule, like everything, and you get those superstars that can do both really well, really quickly. But for most people, it takes time and practice to switch between the two. And I don't see that changing anymore.
When that offer came to you to go to sevens, the Olympics the next year, I mean, was it the Olympics that kind of gave you that sort of, I'm going to give this a try? Like, if the Olympics weren't on the table and this was just come and play in the World Series, would there have been a different mindset, do you think, of the switch?
Yeah, definitely. I think I was chatting to I think it was the Brumbies at the time. I'd just done a pre-season down there with Stephen Larkham, and I loved it. And I, really enjoyed the culture at the club. So that would have been around 2014, 2015. And then I remember I got the sevens deal, and I remember speaking to my manager going, what about the Brumbies? And then they were like, no, like, it's the Olympics. It's like the pinnacle of rugby this year. Like, go do it. You're only 18. You're so young. And that definitely was like, yeah, that's kind of what I want to do. Like, the Olympics is pretty cool. Like, it's not pretty cool. It's the pinnacle of sport. And it's something, I didn't think I could ever become. I didn't think I could ever become an Olympian. So I kind of jumped at that. And like I said, that was it. And the snowball got rolling. And now, as you said before, now I'm a triple Olympian. But yeah, I think maybe if the Olympics went on that year, my career could have been very different.
Which, I mean, looking at the three Olympics you've been to, all three very unique Olympics, and we'll obviously touch on them, each individually. But I mean, Rio itself, going into that, it's kind of an interesting place to make your debut on two levels, because it's your first Olympics in a very unique city, a very unique Olympics, and you're also making your debut with a sport that's making its debut. So you are the new kid on the block on so many levels. I mean, kind of, do you remember sort of that lead in, getting to Rio, kind of just that vibe? And I guess you're with a bunch of people. You can't exactly rely on them for what was the last Olympics like, because you're all there. You're all new. This is completely new for all of you.
Yeah, definitely. So obviously, like, it wasn't my debut for the team. So I'd been playing it on our World Series circuit all year. So I knew my team well. But you're right. It was a debut for our team members and our staff members to be incorporated in this Australian Olympic Committee group, and to then, fall into that system to try and perform at that level. It's a whole different ball game. Like it's just completely different. And I do think that the men's team, probably struggled with that, going from we do it this way at a World Series, and then the Olympics and the AOC did it completely different. And no one had the experience to be ready for that adjustment as a player, but I guess neither at an administration level either. So it was definitely a different competition. And then, we've gotten better each year, and Paris was our most successful Olympics, and hopefully we can go even better again in LA.
Do you remember sort of things like when you get to Rio and seeing something as little as the first time you see the Olympic rings, or you're in the village? Like, I mean, that whole just outside of the competition side of things, the Olympic experience. I mean, did that hit you at any point that I'm here, I'm an Olympian, this is actually happening?
It definitely did. I think at 18 though, like everything's a bit of a blur, and sometimes it's hard for you to take it all in and respect it for what it is. And you go, I think I look back on my Rio experience, and even though I might have deserved to be there for playing well that season, I didn't feel like I deserved to be there with the other Olympians who've been potentially training for this event for 4 years or for 8 years, however long it was for them, and for other rugby sevens competitors who might have stayed in the sport longer, sacrifice other deals to stay to go to the Olympics. They'd put the hard years in earlier than I had. I kind of turned up in 2015, 2016, had a really good season and got there. So looking back on it, I don't feel like I, deserve to rub shoulders with them more subconsciously, and then I might have been misfired on when I performed, because I feel like I didn't perform in Rio that well because I probably wasn't ready, and I probably wasn't, I hadn't done the hard work.
Did you feel that changed at subsequent Olympics? Did you kind of get to Tokyo or Paris and maybe the mindset was a little bit different?
Definitely. I thought I individually performed well in Tokyo. The team was a little bit better, but not that much better. And then I performed well again in Paris, and the team was fantastic in Paris because the group had stayed together and they had all worked together and put in and brought in for 4 to 8 years. So they were all ready to be there. And once I was ready, I then appreciated it more. I was like, oh my God, this is actually super special. This is super amazing. Like, look at all these athletes. Like, I know what everyone here has sacrificed because I now have sacrificed that. I have now done that work. I put the blood, sweat and tears in, for a lack of a better term, to be here. So have they. This is awesome.
Did you, in that first experience, get to go watch many other sports? Did you do any of the ceremonies, kind of pin trading, just anything along those lines? Or was that sort of, the more Olympics you went to, you learnt that these are things that you maybe got to be a bit more involved in?
The way around. The first one, I kind of did it all. We went to the opening ceremony, we went to the closing ceremony. I went and saw the sports. I had 12 days in the village after competing. It was kind of, I feel, the last of the, old system where you would go in early and stay the whole time. Yeah. When now it's kind of like hotbeds. They get you in, they get you out, because of the financial kind of implications of the games and just the resources. So I got the full Olympic experience off the field. So don't get me wrong, I didn't miss out there, and that was great fun. But the reality is you don't go to the Olympics for that. It's a byproduct of the games. It's a bonus. Yeah. You go there to win, and you go there to perform. And if you're going there to go to the Heineken house, you're going there for the wrong reasons. So obviously Tokyo, you didn't really get to do that because it was a bit of an anomaly with COVID, and it really lacked that kind of unity feeling of all the other nations. But I thought Paris, we had a really good balance. We got really involved as a team with the Australian house and the Australian team. We made an effort to meet other athletes and rub shoulders with people we wouldn't, swap pins and do all of that. But then we also didn't go to the opening ceremony or the closing ceremony. We chose our moments right. So to ensure that we would perform on our day.
It's a great point you make with that, because they are like very unique in terms of locations and the style. But yeah, Rio really was kind of that last one that we've sort of seen where that's sort of been integrated, and obviously we saw how it's changed to Paris. I mean, did you miss that in Paris though? Like, you sort of look back at what Rio was like and wish that maybe that could be something that new Olympians could experience, that kind of style of the Olympics back then?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's going to be a problem moving forward for the Olympics. It's clearly moving into a decentralized product where they're going to have satellite um, villages around a country or around a big city to accommodate all the sports, but also all the athletes. So the IOC and the national organizations are really going to have to work hard at still making those satellite cities or making those hubs feel like a mini village, because it still needs to be a pinnacle big event and be like the greatest sporting event in the world every 4 years. Because if it loses that, then what's the difference for other athletes just comparing it to like their world championships? So it is a bit of a catch-22. I understand, how it's, financially almost impossible now to put all the athletes in one big village and keep everyone in there for 3 weeks. But on the flip side, if they lose that Olympic aura, we're at risk of just being, individual sports competing at like a second world championships, which we don't want. So there's going to be a little bit of, creative thinking and ingenuity to try and get the best blend of both.
Couldn't agree more with that. That's a great way of putting it. I mean, with Rio, so the men's tournament back then, if I'm not mistaken, was after the women's. Obviously, they switched it around sort of in subsequent Olympics. But so you're coming into that off the back of the girls winning the gold. So did that add an extra sort of sense of, I don't know, like excitement, mood, like you'd seen the girls do it, like, come on, guys, we can do this as well? Like, I mean, do you remember sort of what that mood was like going into that after seeing them win the gold that they won?
Yeah, I think so. Again, my reflections on Paris and Tokyo are a lot more clear, and I know exactly how I was thinking and feeling and how I was performing. Where Rio, I'm a little bit more hazy. I go back to, and it's a bit of a cop, but I was just keen to go. I was so 18, ready to go. My job was to be in the wing and score tries, and that I did that all season, and I could do, and I kind of tried to do it again at the Olympics. But the mood of the team, did that change? Did the girls winning gold put more pressure on the core boys? Maybe. Did it spark me to play better instead of fighting me? I don't know, but I was a bit more of an extra in that team. Not that I wasn't important, but like I was the youngest by so far. I followed. Where in Tokyo and Paris, I was much more in that core group of players where I was in touch with the mood of the team and I could impact it and really influence the direction of where we would go. So Rio, yeah, it was a funny one. We clearly misfired, and then we had to make up with a few games, and we fought tooth and nail to get ourselves into the quarterfinal, and we lost to South Africa, who ended up coming third. But yeah, sevens is a game of really fine margins. In Paris, there's probably about 9 teams in Paris that could have won a gold medal. It's a very competitive sport. And you seriously can only need to make 1 or 2 mistakes as an entire team, and that's enough to lose a game.
The one thing I love asking athletes in sports where you have playoff games that aren't for medals. So obviously you lose the quarterfinals and you've got to go into a semi-final that gets you into a playoff to play off the 5th. Like, it seems weird that they still call it a semi. Do you like that or do you not like? Because we sometimes look at that and go, what's the point? But then sometimes I get athletes on the show and they go, well, there's a lot of point. Like, finishing 5th at the Olympics is better than just being quarter. Like, how do you look back at going like, we played off the 7th in 2 Olympics?
Yeah, it's tough. It's in the Olympics. It's tough in our normal World Series kind of circuit, it's not as tough because you go points towards an aggregate winner at the end of the year, and you're still fighting for points, and it still matters at the end of the season if where you finish and where your ranking is. So you can get up for that, and it's also it's a test. It's a test on you mentally and physically to get up when the chips are down, and you bank that, and you go, look, I got up and I played an awesome game for seventh when I was really, really sore last week. Now I'm playing for first and second and I'm feeling fresh. Like, I can do this. You know what I mean? So that is so fine. Playing for fifth or sixth or seventh and eighth, or even worse, ninth, 10th, 11th, 12th at the Olympic Games is tough because everyone is going there to win. And if you don't win, it's a failure. It's a failure essentially for most players and most teams. And our competition is stacked enough where there was seriously nine teams there that would want to win a medal, and preferably gold. So losing that quarterfinal in Paris would be hard. But I guess the spectators, they've paid for their tickets and they want to see the product and they want to see people play off. So you just got to do what you got to do. But, like if we won our quarterfinal and we beat USA, so USA are so close for glory to get into playoff for a first, second, third or fourth, but they lose to us. They then play Argentina, who was seed 2, and they lose against Argentina, and then they played New Zealand. They pull Argentina and New Zealand and they end up coming 8th. So they're so close, but then they become so far.
Because it's just that level of like I can't imagine. I mean, particularly I look at, say, Tokyo, right? So like you talk about Rio, sort of the memories and sort of fresh kid and all that sort of stuff. But then you get to Tokyo, same situation, lose the quarterfinal, then you lose that. I don't even know what you call that, 5th place semi-final, like whatever the fuck that thing is. Yeah. And then you've got to play off for 8th. I mean, ultimately you get 7th, so yay, we won the 7th place thing. But I when you show up for that 7th place game, it's not like you're like, all right, like, yeah, 7th, come on, that's what we came for the Olympics for. It just must be such a weird mood in that locker room before the 7th place playoff at the Olympics.
Definitely. But then again, it's your choice to how you want to represent your country and represent AOC. Like, you always remember that, like, you're wearing an Australian jersey, and Australians care about how their athletes perform and how they carry themselves. So yes, as difficult as it is and as flattening as it is and heartbreaking it is, like, you're still representing your nation and your family and your team and your teammates, and it's up to you now to find something. And it's those people that can find something in those moments that generally have a longer career.
You touched on, obviously, Tokyo, sort of a bit more on the mindset. You're going into that one feeling a little bit differently. I mean, coming away one place better, 7th, as I said, to 8th in Rio, but I can't imagine that leaving 7th. I mean, the medal, I'm sure, was on the mind. That was sort of the target for Tokyo. I mean, how do you reflect on Tokyo, given that Paris went a bit better, but now sort of reflecting on that period of your career in those Olympics?
Yeah, Tokyo was a funny one. I felt like I was performing well and I was ready physically and mentally. I think it was hard to get a gauge on the rest of the world because no one had played each other since early March 2020, I think it was, because of COVID. So we kind of were just tracking ourselves by comparing ourselves to each other, and it was hard to find out where the other nations sat. So it was a bit of an ambush for everyone when we turned up, but I guess that would have been like every athlete for every sport. So I think the team severely underperformed because we had a good team. Again, I think we didn't start well, and then we found ourselves in a similar position that we had to fight and play well to get back into the games and use energy and drag ourselves out of trouble to then give us a fighting shot at a medal, and we did that, and that was great. But I guess then we pulled Fiji, who then went on to win it, and they beat us in the quarters, and then it's kind of dream over. And then then you fall back into that routine of, all right, I've got to find myself and play hard for fifth and sixth because I'm still representing Australia. So yeah, we didn't start well again, and I know because of that, didn't start well in Rio, didn't start well in Tokyo. We wanted to start well in Paris, not only for ourselves, but we were also the first Australian sporting team to compete for the Australian Olympic team. So we also we felt this not as pressure, more a responsibility to start the Olympic team, the Australian Olympic team off with 2 wins. Get the momentum, get it going.
I definitely touch on that because you pretty much answered one of my questions I was going to ask that. But 2 quick things I wanted to touch on before I got to Paris, and I'm just backtracking a little bit before Tokyo. I believe you did try the switch back to 15s not long after Rio. So was that a designated career plan to try to make the 15s Wallabies World Cup? I mean, sort of what brought about that decision and then what brought about coming back into the sevens fold?
Yes, yeah, no, you're right. So I did 2 years at sevens and then signed it was like a 2.5 year deal down at the Rebels. I guess at that time, everything was going really well. Then the Force folded, which is the Western Perth team, and then a lot of the Force players merged into the Rebels team. So squad blew out, big squad size. This is playing a bit well as me, but I guess this is what happened. The coaches down at Rebels that signed me got moved on, and we inherited the Force coach, and he didn't like the style that I played, and I just wasn't getting picked, and I guess I kind of hit the first big roadblock in my career that I've ever experienced, which was, I learned a lot about myself and learned a lot about the game and how fickle it could be and how important the relationship is with the coach and player, and I learned heaps. And yeah, basically I was, unfortunately, I was still only 20, but I was shown the door pretty quickly at the Rebels. I was fit to play, ready to play whenever I was needed. I just was never called upon and basically told reasonably straightforwardly that, look, Rebels wasn't going to be a place for me. Maybe find a new club. And I guess after the Force folded, there's a lot of players kind of floating around without a deal. Sevens offered me a deal back. The coach was now Tim Walsh, who really liked me, and we had a great relationship with. So I was pretty quick to go back to what I knew well and what I loved, and I missed the style that we played at sevens. I missed my involvements. So I took that deal, and yeah, I've been there ever since.
And before Paris, another challenge, I believe you did your ACL beginning of 2023, which obviously put you on the sidelines for quite a bit. So was a challenge then to get fit and ready and have that goal of making it to your 3rd Olympics. And I can imagine that would have been a real task at that hand.
Yeah, there's always challenges. You look back at your career and you go, wow, this is all happening. And then COVID comes and that stops the games, and then do your ACL. And yeah, look, the ACL was probably my biggest injury to date. I've been reasonably lucky with injuries, a couple of small broken bones, but nothing major. And then obviously the ACL came in January 2023, probably when I was playing my best footy I've ever playing. So I think, Murphy's Law, that happens to a lot of people. And look, that was tough, but it took my time. I took 12 months to do the rehab, and I returned 364 days later, so basically to the year.
Not that you were counting at all, just yeah.
Not that I was counting. I know that because Sydney Sevens returned in Perth Sevens, and it's on the same weekend.
Okay, there you go.
So easy maths. I did my knee on the Saturday, returned on the Friday, so 365 minus 364. So figure it out. Anyway, I learned a lot about myself during that time. About how to be a good team man while not playing, about helping other people and focusing myself, and you do a lot of self-discovery in those periods of long-term injury, and I do truly think I've come back better person, but also, probably a better player too. Like you're not always as fast or as explosive as you were when you pre an injury like that, and you may never get to be where you were, but you come back more clever, you're more intuitive. You have to think about it differently. You have to be smarter. So definitely got a lot of growth out of that long term injury. So if anyone's listening that is going through a long term injury, like the silver linings will come. They might take a while, but they will.
One thing that happened then too in the lead up to Paris and throughout that sort of growth that you're talking about, you become vice captain of the team. Question I have about that is, what do you actually do as a vice captain? I mean, are you legitimately just hoping that the captain gets injured and that's going to be your progression? I mean, is it like the vice president of the US? You don't really have much to do? Or like, is there actually a role that you kind of actually do play as a vice captain of a rugby sevens team?
Yeah, I'd actually say it's quite an important role, not because I was doing it, but it's a bit like a headmaster and a deputy headmaster of a school. Well, it was in our team at least, and it could be different to different squads, but definitely in the way our makeup of our squad was, like Nick Maloof was our captain, and he was a great leader, and he took care of the overview kind of strategy of the team and the direction, and um, was the boss man, I guess, and had the end call on everything. Where on big decisions, I guess, had the end call on big decisions. Where if I'm not sure if you ever got any detentions or Saturdays at school, Ben,
Of
but
course not. Of course not, Henry. I was a very well behaved boy. I don't know the meaning of the word. What are you talking about?
Good. Well, I was told, because I was exactly like you, if you ever had a detention or a Saturday, you're always dealing with the deputy headmaster. He was always pulling people in line, keeping the school's reputation up, and keeping the progression of students going the right way, et cetera, et cetera. I guess that would be a little bit like the vice captain for us. I'm probably making myself sound like I was a bit of an angry tyrant, but my job was to make sure that the little things were all in place. So, it was easy for, I guess, when Moosey and I needed to make a decision, it was an easy decision So it was it's quite a busy role, and with Moosey gone, I guess captaincy and vice captaincy's up. So yeah, we'll see who fills those spots.
Is it a case of you are tapped on the shoulder from a coach or somebody on the coaching staff saying, Henry, we think you've got good leadership qualities. Would you like to do this? Or is it more of you've got ambitions to be sort of like you're pushing a little bit to be a bit more of a leadership, if that makes sense? I kind of, what stage are you being touted as a possible vice captain that can then lead into the captaincy?
It's a good question. I guess it's a bit of both and a bit of neither. Like, you don't want to be pushing for it. You don't want to be hungry for it, because that can come off the wrong way. And it goes, oh, he's in it for the clout, or he's in it for himself, or he wants the power. And you definitely don't want that. Like, the best leaders, it will come naturally. And then I guess when it comes naturally, you just find yourself in these positions where you're talking a little bit more, making the right decisions, galvanizing the group and looking after the group's mental health. That's when the coach or a director might say, hey, look, would you be interested? We think you'd be good at, That would be probably how it works. I probably just kind of fell into the vice captaincy role a little bit more naturally. And then if Moosey was ever injured or he was away or for a tournament, I'd step up. And, you get those exposures of being captain for the week or for the 2 weeks, and then you drop back down. So it's always good to have a little bit of exposure at that leadership level before, I guess, officially getting it. But yeah, so a bit of both, but you definitely don't want to be too pushy, because the boys will pick up on that behaviour, and they won't respect it.
It's good to have a bit of power though, right? Like, does it feel pretty special when you can be like, I look at me, I'm the captain now, basically. Like,
I don't know, Ben, you're holding the mic. I should ask you. It's your show.
Very, very powerful right now, but I mean, like, it's got to feel pretty cool though to have that level, and also the top level of your sport representing your country is kind of the top echelon that you can reach. I mean, it must be a pretty prideful thing to say that you've captained the side.
Definitely. I think it keeps you accountable too. Like, to be captain, you need to be performing every weekend. You need to be making good decisions every weekend. Like, the leniency on and off the field is not there, as it shouldn't be. So it's full time, and Nick Maloof did a great job. He was consistent on the field, but also probably even more so consistent off the field, which is, if not more important.
You touched on Paris, the importance of starting off well. 21-14 against Samoa. Then you go 21-7 against Kenya. Then knock off Argentina, who had been a bit of a side in previous Olympics that maybe hadn't got over. Get into the quarters, beat the USA. We're into the semi-finals. I mean, what was that mood like in the sheds at that point? Because things were absolutely on fire. Not only did you start off well, undefeated, you're a win away from a guaranteed medal at that point. I mean, how was that mood going at that point?
Yeah, I think you're a win away from a guaranteed medal, and every game from now on is you're playing for a medal. So it was high. It was probably one of the greatest moments of my career to hear that whistle go at the end of that grinding game against USA. Who can so easily turn a game with the likes of Perry Bake on the wing. They can just score tries for fun. They drew with France earlier in the day before, so they were playing some brilliant footy. So to win that, not only is it relief, it's like tick, 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 job's done. We're in the rounds where we want to be. But then there's that instant feeling like, all right, what's next? So it's fleeting.
Which... Is there also a level of momentum? Because obviously with your sport, you're playing multiple games in a day most of the time. They're very quick. They're back-to-back. So you have your first two games, 2 days before the opening ceremony. Then you have your quarters the day after. Then you've got to break a day for the opening ceremony. Then you come back a day after. Like, did that break momentum or something? Like, I mean, do you feel that you wish you could just play on the day after rather than having a day in between those games?
Well, that was new for everyone. Usually there wouldn't be a break in that day. So usually we'd play over Saturday, Sunday, 3 games on Saturday, 3 games on Sunday. Or if it's over 4 days, we'd go 2-2-2. Sorry, 3 days, 2-2-2. We'd never competed, but no one had, with a day off in between. So it was different. But we finished that game on, I think it was Thursday night at like 11 p.m. So we got back at 1 a.m. It was a really late finish. So to get up and play that next day would have been pretty tough on the body. So there was that kind of small win of you got a recovery day, and we got a chance to get better for Saturday physically. But then there was that okay, pause all those feelings, pause the momentum, and let's restart it in a day's time, which is really hard. But have we done that better? Well, I guess we could have, because we ended up coming fourth.
Because ultimately, too, having something like an opening ceremony on, which no matter how much you probably try to avoid it, does add a bit of hype levels, right? The Olympics are officially starting. You've obviously got this very unique one happening in Paris and everything along those lines. So I'm sure that Friday is spent of a balance of recovery. You maybe want to be there to support your teammates, and the fact you're at Olympics a little bit better. I mean, how do you balance kind of the highs of the opening ceremony mixed with the recovery of, we've got a pretty important game happening tomorrow?
Look, most of the people in the Australian house knew that we were playing in the semi the next day. So we were definitely not asked to come to any Olympic we were not required to come to any Olympic commitments for the opening ceremony. But we just floated around. The vibes at the Australian house were fantastic. People were watching, people were keen. So we just floated around, had like 3 or 4 coffees, played a lot of articulate, just tried to stay really tight. And I remember it being a really enjoyable time in my life. Like that 3-4 days, we're playing some really great footy. It was probably the tightest the group's ever been. And nothing really bad to report. But then obviously that next day came and Fiji jumped us, and they historically just get better and better and better and better throughout a tournament. It's like they wake up a little bit. Like, you want to play Fiji game 1, you can get them.
Get them done with.
And they did that, and they've consistently just gotten better each game. And they were pretty hot when they played us, but again, it was momentum's a huge thing. Like we were up in that first half. They got a try just before half time to even it up. And momentum swung. And then they hit that second half with speed and started raining. And then they started getting physical and fighting the rucks. And we just lost that momentum grapple, which they then were able to just kind of stack on points in the last 2 minutes. And yeah, and we didn't end up getting the cookies.
I always like finding out the mentality going into a bronze medal game, because I always look at it at a bronze medal game, you're almost hungrier to win it than the gold medal game, because of course you want the gold medal. I'm not taking that away, but you know if you lose that match, you've got a medal anyway, like especially at the Olympics, whereas a bronze medal, you lose, you're fourth and no one wants to be fourth. So do you kind of look at it that way? Do you feel like as much as you would have wanted to win the gold, you would have been hungrier going into that bronze medal game?
Yeah. And we were. Like the boys were shattered about Fiji, and it was a very quick turnaround for our game against South Africa. But they were hungry, and I just think we ran out of legs a little bit. I don't want to say there was a few pretty tough calls against us.
Say it, Henry. Do it. It's fine. It's been a couple of months. Let rip. It's all good.
There's a few tough calls that did not go our way, which hurt us. But we found a way. We put ourselves into extra time. We got a red card, which hurt. So we played with 6 for most of the game. I just think playing with 6, we ran out of legs a little bit, and we just fell so short. And there's nothing really to take away from that. Like the boys were up for it. We played our hearts out. It was just one of those games that just didn't go our way. And honestly, it's completely fucking heartbreaking. And I personally probably never get over it.
I was going to ask that, like, what do you do after? I mean, it's probably a dumb question again. It could be a smart question, Henry, but like, what do you do? Do you personally, do you break down? Do you go and punch some bags? Do you go get on the piss? Like, I mean, what do you do to kind of cope with that high level of disappointment? Which you say it's still to this point, like it's something that obviously still sits with you.
I got really sick. Like your body shuts down. Like, my come down after this Olympics was huge. Like, obviously, we went out that night and got on the piss. Pachamacha Club in Paris, if you ever want to go to it.
Didn't post on social media, I hope, not naming any other people on any Rugby Sevens teams who may have done that. Just,
No, that wasn't us. You.
Good. All right. Okay. Yep.
Close friends only.
Hello, Charlotte. She's a guest on the show, so it's fine.
She knows. Look, obviously we stayed pretty tight as a group that night and the next night. But then the group started to break a bit because boys went on holidays, and then it became how do you deal with it on a personal level? And I don't know, it becomes hazy. I don't really remember it. Like I don't really remember the first kind of 3-4 days after the games. I was in Aix-en-Provence down the south of France, absolutely beautiful. But I just remember it all being a bit of a blur, and it still comes to me now. It just kind of comes back, moments in that South Africa game, moments in that in the Fiji game, or like how I was feeling after the USA game, how I was feeling after the South African game, like how I would feel if this happened and that happened. But as you can see, that can eat you up, and you can go pretty crazy. So you do have to find a way to move on. And I guess the easiest way for me to move on would be to start playing again. And you know what? We have South Africa first up in Dubai in 2 weeks' time. So
perfect time for revenge, which, because it's also using it as motivation. Like we always hear, obviously, disappointment from many athletes on this show who ultimately have something like that happen to them, but it spurs you on because all that pain, all that feeling that you felt, you don't ever want to feel that again. So come 4 years' time in LA, I can imagine fuels that hunger to know how close you were and how much you want to take that next step to break through and win an Olympic medal for men's rugby sevens.
Definitely. And sometimes it takes 12 years to get a medal. That's just what it takes, learning, growth, the right people, the right time to just – it's not easy to get a gold medal at an Olympic Games. Like it's probably one of the hardest things you can do as a sportsman and woman. So sometimes it takes 8 years. And as a person watching, they just see that 14-minute game and like, oh, Henry Hutchison's won a gold medal. How good is that? That looks gun. He's just turned up and won it. It's like, no. I've failed 3 times on getting a medal. So maybe it's going to take another 4 years. Who knows? And that's like every sport, and that's like every athlete. Like, there's a lot of pain and training and mundane tasks and discipline and success and failures for years to get to optimal success.
Did Australia, in the lead up to the Olympics, did we break mirrors, walk under ladders, have black cats walk in front of us? Because, I mean, for God's sakes, both bronze medal gains, we had them, right? And then obviously the similar thing with the girls happened, like at the death, sort of the USA got it. Like, I mean, what was it about the luck that we had sort of in those games, Henry? We need to fix this part of it, right?
I know, our universe juju ran out.
Yeah. I don't know what that was. I was at the women's the bronze game, and just to see that, and was in the mix zone afterwards when Charlotte came through, and just to see that heartbreak of that immediacy of kind of everything about it was one of the hardest things I had to deal with as a journalist at those games. But I mean, it just, for the sport in general, it's sort of, it just, to be that close and to kind of have those highs, and I'm sitting there going like, man, how many ladders do we just need to not walk under for the next Olympics? It just almost seemed like it was just the luck that sort of took it at the end there.
And sometimes it is, it's really tough. It's really tough, and the girls would be feeling the exact same way as we're feeling. Like, to come so short, get so close, to be the only nation with both teams in the semi-finals. Like, no one else had both their men's and women's team in the top 4. But then for us to both not get a medal, like, chances that are not alone. Like, one of us should have walked away with something. So, as much as there was a lot of success for Australian rugby sevens at the Olympics, for both groups to get so close and come home with nothing is pretty bitterly disappointing.
The one positive I wanted to touch on that, though, playing in the Stade de France. I mean, obviously just the crowds there in Paris were beyond anything you can fathom, and obviously with the men's French team winning the gold. I mean, what was that experience like playing in such an iconic stadium too, the Stade de France?
Unbelievable. I think it's definitely the best stadium I've ever played in front of, and they've played in front of a lot of big crowds now. And sevens is a funny one. The crowd can build and shift and change. Your first game in the morning might be 20,000 or less. Could sometimes be 5,000, but then your night game could be in front of 60,000 or whatever. It can change, but it's never packed all the time, because it's like a tournament kind of structure. Where Paris, there was just 75,000 people there from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Screaming. It was. I don't go out and see the field before a game. Like, sometimes like they say, all right, you got an hour to warm up. Like, make yourself available and familiar with the field. Go and check it out. I don't like to do that. I like to, get that shock. Like, oh, here we go. We're on here. Like, it's a footy field. I know what a footy field looks like, and I like to get the little buzz of running out to a stadium in front of people for the first time. I didn't expect it at Paris like that. I ran out and I was like, oh shit, this is huge.
Wow. Yeah, it was. I mean, crazy. You talk back when you were young and watching the Rugby World Cup and having all that. I mean, the first ever soccer World Cup, men's soccer World Cup, I remember watching was France '98. So I remember watching the final in '98 with Zidane scoring 2 goals and just being enamored by it. And so to be at that stadium was like, this is a place I watched growing up, and it was just the atmosphere for the women's ones that I was at was just, I think France played for 7th, I think, from memory, or 5th.
Still getting around it.
Oh God, they were just insane. Like, it was absolutely something else beyond that. Since coming back, you obviously touched on a little bit kind of the holidays and sort of getting over and things along those lines. But whatever, in terms of where you're at now, you're about to play in some more series and everything along those lines. But did you get any time off just to chill outside of sort of what you were talking about? Yeah. I mean, kind of, and kind of what I guess, what's the last couple of months been like since you've gotten back from Paris?
Yeah, so we had about 5 weeks off, 5.5 weeks off. So I did a little bit of traveling through Europe afterwards with my girlfriend Claudia, and and some friends and family. So, I enjoyed myself and really switched off from footy, switched off from training, rested the body. But then I guess we came back in and we started pre-season. There's been a lot of change at Rugby Australia in our squad with coaches and players moving on and things moving. So there's still a lot of moving pieces um, at the moment. Our got a new coach that starts in January. So at the moment, kind of wouldn't say we're in a holding pattern, but we're kind of waiting for him to come in so he could start, putting his kind of touch onto the team. So look, we've been in pre-season for maybe about 8 weeks now, maybe 9 weeks. And we've got another week and a half to go before we rip into Dubai.
And then, so you obviously each year have the World Series. One thing I just wanted to quickly ask, no Rugby Sevens at the next Commonwealth Games, and we obviously know the reasons behind it. It's obviously, a pretty band-aided Commonwealth Games that they've put together in Glasgow. But does that impact the sport a lot? Because you don't have sort of this middle tournament in between an Olympic cycle to kind of, get a bit more of a preparation for LA?
Yeah, we were really disappointed with that. Like obviously the Olympics is amazing and that's the pinnacle, but the Com Games is still a great event. And, we obviously know there was issues with countries hosting it, financial issues, but when they decided to make a shortened version, we thought, rugby's a shoe-in event because it sells out every year. You look at the Commonwealth nations that play rugby. You've got Fiji, New Zealand, South Africa, Australia, Samoa, England, Wales, Scotland, Tonga. Like, they're huge rugby nations. So we thought, rugby sevens will be safe. When we played in Birmingham, there's 40,000 there every single day, and if it's going to be it's in England, isn't it? Is it?
Scotland, Glasgow.
Scotland.
So, yeah.
Scotland, home of rugby sevens, that's where rugby sevens was born. So we're like, shoo in. So to see that not getting added in was a shock and disappointing. And to see a sport, I guess, basketball, 3-on-3 basketball, like that's an American sport, So there was definitely a bit of a, okay, what does this mean? But the fact that it's just another tournament we're not playing, like we want to play more sport, we want to play more rugby, we want to be on the TV more often. Like we're dying for more big tournaments. So for one to be taken away, it's not good.
Hopefully 2030, wherever those, if the Commonwealth Games are still around by then, that can sort of be looked at. Just on LA, obviously, the goal, and I hate asking Olympians so soon after an Olympics, you're going to the next one because, you're still recovering from the one you've just come back from. But do you think playing in a city like Los Angeles, where it's obviously a sport that it's not the number one sport, but we're seeing rugby grow around the world thanks to sevens and everything along those lines. I mean, how do you expect LA to embrace rugby sevens?
I think rugby in America it's still in takeoff mode. It's been there for a little while now. The USA men's sevens and women's sevens team is very strong, and they've been strong for a little while. That hasn't fully correlated across into their 15-man's game yet. There is a professional league there called the MLR, and that's getting more and more professional. That's where our head coach just went to. He's going to be the head coach of San Diego.
Right.
San Diego. So it's definitely building, and they've got the Rugby World Cup in
2031, I think.
31?
Yeah, I think it's one after us. We've got the next one, right? And then I think they've got the 2031 one, yeah.
You're right. So it's growing. I don't think the fact that it's not killing it at the moment will actually impact rugby sevens at the Olympics, because what I do know is that Americans love sport and they love getting around sport and they love going to events. So if the Olympics sell it well and they can put on a show like this is going to be a high impact game, get it out there for the public to be interested in, it could be the light it needs to really set off rugby in America, wake the bear up and wake this, mega nation with mega athletes to get into rugby, which would be great for the sport.
Well, you touched on handball earlier. I mean, back in Sydney, a sport which Australians, let's be honest, none of us know anything about, still selling out because Australians, we just get behind the sport. We want to see it. It's the Olympics, right? And we're going to see cricket in LA, a sport which Americans I'm sure every time you come here and you try, oh, well, tell me more about cricket, man. Like you try explain it. It's not
no idea.
No idea. I was in Washington DC last week. We went out for dinner at this town with my friend, and it was an Irish bar, admittedly, but walk in and on every screen in that bar was the All Blacks versus Ireland game, and everybody was glued to it. And it kind of took me a while to realize, like, I'm in Washington DC right now. This isn't just Sydney. This is, a bar in the US. But everyone was glued to it. Again, an Irish bar, so I'm sure a lot of the people were Irish, but it was still very fascinating to be in a part of the world where you don't expect to see that sport on TV. So I think you're right. Like Americans, they get behind sport no matter what. We're seeing that with NRL trying to try that in Vegas. Like it's got to try some things, and I'm sure they'll embrace every single aspect of every sport we're going to see in LA in a few years' time.
Yeah, agreed.
Which is going to be very, very exciting. Before I get to some wrap-up questions, Henry, we'd like to wrap up with some get-to-know-you fun-style questions then. The one thing I wanted to ask you about, you are now on the Athletes Commission of the Australian Olympic Committee. Give me a bit of an idea of what this is, what your role is, and sort of what made you sort of want to get involved in this.
Yeah, so basically it's a advisory board to the AOC board. An advisory committee to the AOC board on, I guess, decisions and direction that the athletes would like to take, like moving forward into 2020. Basically, Brisbane is the overarching kind of like, how can we grow and develop for our really successful home Brisbane Games, but along the way implement the mission or the structure to have success in all the games leading into Brisbane as well. And we're kind of the voice of the athletes to make sure that our goals are aligned with the AOC's goals. And that can be from anything from funding to like tournaments to mental health to whatever, just to making sure that the athletes can give their best at the up and coming winter and summer games leading into Brisbane. So when we're at home, we can play and we can perform our best for the Australian public.
I'm loving all these different side quests, like, hosting, emceeing events, now commissions, everything like that. I mean, you're still so young, Henry. I mean, you've got another 2-3 Olympics in you. I mean, you're going to be Prime Minister in 20 years at this rate, I think, if you keep going with all these things. You're doing well.
Oh, I like to stay busy, I guess. My dad always used to say, I'd complain to him, oh, I'm so busy, Dad. He goes, you like to be busy, son. So get on with it. So, it's good to diversify your skills a little bit, learn, and, I actually had my first AOC board committee meeting yesterday. So I got to meet a lot of new people, rub shoulders with them, and everyone's got different ideas. Everyone comes from different walks of life and has gone through their own, journeys to be where they are today. So there's a lot to learn. That's good. I like to progress myself and keep learning and try different things. So I'll continue to put my hand up.
Who was the coolest person on that boardroom meeting? Can you tell us, like, who was in that room with you?
Oh, that's a good question. What about it's Meg Sicilian? I reckon she's the GOAT.
Okay, all right, I like that.
Not an athlete, but she does a lot.
You got it.
Meg gets it. Meg gets it.
Yeah, no, I like it. You got a name drop. That's what we like to do on this show. Get it out there and do that. So see how that goes out. One thing before I get to the questions, I want to do a Wikipedia fact check for me, Henry, here, all right? Because I never trust Wikipedia.
A lot of my mates get on that and troll it, so be careful what you read.
This is where I'm going to get clarification. On the Australian Rugby Sevens team page on Wikipedia, you are listed as the record try scorer for the men's Australian Rugby Sevens, but this was back in 2023 with its last update. Are you the record holder? Do you have the record holder for most tries ever for the men's team in the World Series?
No, that is correct.
All right, good.
Yeah,
okay.
That's me.
Good. I want to go back and do the reintroduction then, going the record holder right now for...
How many does it say now?
Well, it says 115, and this is where I'm thinking like this might be a bit dated because it says 2023, and I'm assuming you scored a few more in the last year and a bit. So
I think I scored 115 in Sydney in 2023 against Canada.
Yeah.
That got me to number one. And then I got injured the next game. And but I've scored a couple since then, but not that many actually. But
what's your number?
That should be
you know
updated.
your number, Henry. Come on.
I
what's your
actually
number?
don't. It would be it would be no more than 125, I reckon.
Which is it like, again, going back to my question about being captain or vice captain, it's a pretty badge of honour though. Like, you've got this record. That's like Ricky Ponting, the most runs ever in Test cricket. Like, it's kind of like it's a nice badge of honour, right?
The boys don't seem to think so. I hardly score tries anymore. That was my job back in the day when I was a little bit fast, and now I'm stuck in the middle making tackles. They're a rarity.
Damn.
Hard work.
Milk it while you can, mate. That's all I say. Own it. We wrap up every interview set of get to know you style questions. As always, these are questions that they gave to Team Canada ahead of Rio and Pyeongchang. I've actually got a rugby sevens player, Bianca Farella. Do you know Bianca at all? No?
No.
Don't. I was going to just not
assuming she might be in the Canadian women's sevens team.
She is. Like I don't know how like close like sort of the men and the women from different nations interact, but no,
I'm sure I'd know a face.
Okay, she was at least
names. I'm really bad with names.
She was at least on the squad for 2016, so that's all I can say there with Team Canada. Which did they get bronze in Rio, or was that because I know? Yeah, I know they got silver, obviously, in Paris. Our co-host is Canadian, and he likes to talk up how big of a deal Canada winning a medal in rugby was. So
that was big.
Yeah, I mean, again, going back to the nations that you don't really associate with rugby, like Canada.
That was a surprise. I think that was a big surprise. So, yeah, good on them.
And that was when our women lost to them in the semis. That was I think that really bad day when all of our sporting teams seemed to lose to a Canadian team on that day. Which, again, our co-hosts never let us forget that day, so we'll move on from that. But these questions, basic, there's no right or wrong answers. As always, there is an optional drawing element if you'd like to. How are you drawing? Are you good at drawing, or you just want to pass on that?
I might just immediately pass.
Okay, all right. Just I always like to be polite enough to ask. Yeah, that's fine. I mean, one of the options here is to draw a picture of yourself. There's draw a picture of a Canadian animal. We can make that an Australian animal for you. There's usually draw a picture of your teammate. So if there's any, pent-up anger against any teammate that you want to draw them into a picture, by all means, send it in. We can put it on our social media. But we'll start off with the first question for you today, and that is, if you could choose any Olympic host city, where would it be?
Any Olympic host city. So I can go to any city in the world, or they have
any city in the world. You could choose Hobart. Come on, you could choose a little tiny city somewhere. If you're not saying choose Hobart, don't choose Hobart. But just
I won't choose Hobart. My place might sink.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it would.
Okay. For me I reckon. And I'm not sure how they would go with the infrastructure. But if they were to do it pretty well, Buenos Aires would be a pretty good city to help host it.
Yes.
Bit different.
Yes.
Like, I'm sure there's a better one, but never been to Argentina, and big rugby country. Rugby's on the up there, but great sport country as well. And I think they'd get around it, and it'd be a lot of fun.
The fans alone. I mean, they had the Youth Olympics a few years back. But no, I mean, God, I think that would be epic. I mean, I never went to Rio. Logistically, I understand the challenges they had, but I like the fact that South America can now lay claim to hosting Olympics. We only need Africa to host an Olympics, and all the continents have hosted an Olympics. But Buenos Aires would be
maybe Cape Town then. Cape Town's a great city in South Africa, but I've been many times. I want to go somewhere I haven't been before.
Okay, Buenos Aires. We'll talk to the IOC. We've got connections. We like to think at least. Put it out there. In your spare time, what do you most like to do?
Jump on a podcast with you, Ben.
Best answer ever. That should be a guaranteed answer. I mean, here we got Bianca saying she likes to hike, sleep, and watch TV. Not coming on this podcast.
No, come on.
Who cares about that?
The podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Have you? I mean, actually, in all seriousness, I think I mentioned I watched you on another podcast. But do you enjoy sort of this side of it, like being able to kind of do podcasts, other media interviews, things like that? Because some people love it, some people hate it.
Definitely. You just get to show a little bit of insight to yourself, but also the journey which your team has been on. And, it's just through the prism of my eyes. So I like to listen to other boys' podcasts to see how they're feeling on certain things, and we can compare the pair.
And get their secrets, get their insights. Have you thought about hosting your own podcast at all?
Maybe. I don't know if I'm interesting enough.
No, I mean, come on, you're on this show, mate. Like, seriously, if I'm considered interesting, you're about 20 times more interesting than I am. I think you've got a great starting board for that. So, because I think
Maybe
it's
one day.
maybe because it's always interesting, sort of like so many athletes, obviously, that are doing it, and it really gives that insight. And they're the ones that I really enjoy because it's sort of like it's all well and good for me to get you on a show like this and interview you, but when you're say, getting someone, you get Nick on, you get Maurice on, somebody like that, where you're teammates and you sort of got that camaraderie, like. Just putting ideas out there for you, Henry. Just add more to your busy.
I like it.
Busy plate.
Busy
the weirdest,
schedule.
yeah, busy schedule. But hey, just talking to a microphone, it's easy. The weirdest instruction a coach ever gave you was.
Jeez, on or off the field.
Whichever one's weirder.
I might incriminate a few people if I go off the field. On the field. There's nothing too weird, but there's always like funny slangs, like little terminologies to help you like defend well. It's like if you're a coach back in the day would say if you got tits over your knees, you're tracking well. Like so if you're sitting, like if you're leaning forward, tits over knees, you're in a good position to tackle. Or if you're sitting on the toilet, you're in a bad place to tackle. So that's kind of the opposite kind of body positions to be in. Or like if you're cocked to sideline, that means your hips are turned and it's not going the right way, you'll get stepped. So there's a few little funny innuendos there that like it's easy for us to remember and be like, oh, don't do that.
Yeah. That's the thing. I love kind of hearing those sort of ones because they're unique to every sport as well, and it kind of just the way it kind of does that. Do you have any
education?
Do you have superstitions that you sort of before a game, like you got to put a shoe on a certain time? You wear special socks? Like, do you have anything along those lines at all?
Nah, not really. Look, I think it's a bit of a dangerous rabbit hole you can get into. If I've done something in the warm up and it's easy to just copy that for the next game. Yeah, I might just by choice on that day, but that can easily change. I'll have a bad game. It gets thrown out straight away. So not really. I try not to. Like I don't eat much on a game day, so I keep like my big rocks the same. So like I'm a little eater. Drives my S&C insane. Like I won't eat before midday, and on game day I eat like a couple of muffins and that's it. So I keep those things the same, but yeah, definitely not like left boot, left sock, mouth guard, right shoe, right sock.
Things like that. Are there team, and you don't have to, well, you can if you want to name and shame them, but are there teammates who are like that?
Yeah. Heaps of weirdos out there.
You can name and shame them on your future podcast, of course. Speaking of food, your favorite sandwich is?
I would go a fresh sandwich. I think fresh sandwiches are better than toasted.
Yep. I
don't know, just the lot, I guess. It's got to have beetroot in there.
Okay. All right.
Beetroot, special ingredients. So like maybe like a chicken. But my two favorite vegetables are beetroot and tomato. So without those two, it just doesn't have the freshness, and it's just garbage. So beetroot, tomato, shredded carrot, iceberg lettuce, maybe like something a bit like a pickle. I like a pickle or a jalapeno kind of like spice to it. Some mayonnaise and some chicken, an avocado on white sourdough bread. Hard to beat.
Is that what was for lunch today? Was that on the same?
I think it was
today,
pretty similar. I think there was an egg involved too, which is pretty good.
Rare commodity now, the eggs, right? Like, come on, that's like
getting
truffle.
Expensive.
Basically adding into that. Wow, there you go. Speaking of food again, if you could have lunch with any one person, who would it be?
Wow. The list is endless, but I was a big Slim Shady fan growing up, so it'd be pretty cool to have lunch with Eminem.
Do you think he'd take part in a beetroot and tomato? And
get around. Get around.
Think he'd be on board with that? Okay.
Yeah, right. I reckon he's deep down a friendly guy.
That would be an interesting lunch, him, because like he's one of those people that you kind of, I feel you'd go into it thinking he'd be a certain way, but he'd come out of it completely different. Like,
yeah, I reckon he'd be a good guy. Misunderstood, like myself sometimes, misunderstood.
Hey, there you go. Is there a rap career for you, maybe in this as well?
Or, no,
not quite. All right. So I have to ask a question.
Too dyslexic for that.
If you could have any superpower, Henry, what would it be?
Or I used to think going forward and backwards in time, but I also think that'd be excruciatingly painful.
Mm-hmm.
So scrap that. Flying would be good.
Yep.
Everyone says flying, but maybe just teleporting. That'd be pretty
Yeah.
ideal. Just bling,
It's
skip all
pretty
those
easy.
long haul flights.
Yep. Just be there. No jet lag. You'd be, just
No jet
ready,
lag.
ready to go.
Yeah,
Things like that.
let's
You
look,
get your
let's look in teleporting.
yeah, done, locked in. As a kid, your favorite sports team was
But definitely the Wallabies. I was pretty
mm,
obsessed. I used to wear
okay.
a hat saying, "I want to be, gotta be a Wallaby." So yeah, it's pretty up the Wallabies.
Did you go to any of the games in 2003 at all?
Uh, I remember watching Australia play Romania at the Dog in Randwick, and they put like 100 points on them. I don't think I went out to any live games, no, but I watched them all pretty glued to the TV.
The one that I know I've told the story on this pod before, but Tasmania got one game. We got Romania versus Namibia up in Launceston, and I was from Hobart.
The
So
two worst.
the traditional rivals basically. But so they were pretty much going on like, oh, how is anybody in Tasmania going to support these teams? So they basically said if you were born on an even day, you would go for Romania. If you were born on an odd day, you would go for Namibia. And that game, we got like 20,000 people to York Park in Launceston. Romania shattered in. I can't even remember the score, but Namibia got a try at the very end, and the crowd went
So
off like
bad.
Australia won the World Cup. Like it was the crowd just went off for Namibia, and it was just insane atmosphere, and it was just incredible to watch these two teams who, nobody really thinks about in rugby, and we all got behind it because we just wanted a game of World Cup rugby in our state. So.
I think Namibia and Romania were both in the Wallabies pool. I think.
Yeah,
So, and
yeah.
that just wouldn't happen now. Like
Mm,
those minnow nations are good now.
mm.
Like you're playing those, like you played Georgia and stuff, and they're good footy teams now. Like
Yeah.
those days of the floggings are the days of the past.
And then, as we saw in the last World Cup, the Wallabies usually, and maybe on the other side of that, but we won't talk about that really at this point.
Yeah.
If you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be?
I think it'd be where you are right now.
New York?
New York, Manhattan Island, for a little while, maybe 2 years. It'd be hard to be a professional athlete, but I'm just saying if I could manage both. New York for 2 years would be pretty fun, but
Is there
any longer could go wild.
yeah? Do you have a favorite of all the sevens destinations? I mean, you go to some pretty spectacular destinations around the world, but do you have a favorite that you get to play in of the entire series?
Playing in the cities are always a little bit different. I think playing in Hong Kong is the best, and I love the city too. But I guess if I was to live in one of the cities, I'd be playing quite often. But London's good. London gets cold. Maybe Cape Town. Cape Town's pretty nice.
Mm-hmm. They still do the Vancouver one? Is that still on the
Still do the Vancouver.
one? Yep.
Not a massive fan of Vancouver. I'm the bloke swimming up against the stream in the team with Vancouver. The boys love it. I just find it just a bit too cold and grey for me, if I'm being honest.
It's an I lived on Vancouver Island, so not far from there. So it's an interesting part of the world. But you find all the Aussies go up to Whistler. They're all working in the ski slopes. There's more Australians there, I think, than Canadians. So
It's good change. I think the boys like it because it's cold, it snows, it's different. It's a different vibe to Sydney. So I'm a simple man. You put me on the beach on 28 degrees with a Corona and a rugby ball, like you.
Yeah, the athletes commission, if they say we're sending you to Milan, you're going to politely decline and go, no, I don't want to go to the Winter Olympics, thank you.
Yeah. Take me to the summer ones, please.
Yeah, I'll go to that one. Last one I'll ask you, Henry, and this is one that you may have ready to go or you may not. What is your favourite joke to tell?
Oh.
Do you have a joke?
Oh my God, I don't have a joke. I'm now just going through my brain. Okay,
I'll tell you Bianca's in a moment if you can't think of one, because I'm not sure what I think about Bianca's here. It's a kind of a dad joke, but they're all right?
Hang on. There was one. I'm just going through my.
We like to test. We like to test our guests. We end out on a, make sure that you're thinking hard. All right, I'm going to tell you Bianca's.
I've got nothing.
You gone blank? Blank? All right.
Gone blank.
Actually, I was just going to quickly say, when you were in Melbourne, did you follow any AFL teams at all?
Yes, unfortunately, Essendon.
Okay, well then you could
I didn't
say
live anywhere near Essendon, but
Collingwood's a joke, but Essendon's a joke. I'm a Carlton supporter, so I can rip into Essendon as much as I like. The joke that I'll have for Bianca: what's orange and sounds like a parrot?
I know.
A carrot? Yeah. No, like.
Well, that's pretty. It looks obvious. My simple brain couldn't figure it out.
I think it's just one of those ones that kind of sits with you for a little bit, and you're like, yep, all right, cool. If people are listening to the audio of this, watch the video of it, and Henry's reaction just straight away completely summed that up. Henry, great to have you on the show today. If people want to follow you, social media, stay up to date with all the things you're up to, where can people follow you? Give a plug for anything you want right now to close out the interview.
Oh, not too big on the socials. Just Henry Hutchison at Instagram, really. Twitter's pretty dead account. I just follow all the news pages and follow up, or X, whatever it is now. Don't use Snapchat, not on Facebook. So
TikTok? No TikTok?
No TikTok. Don't do TikTok.
Okay. Not there
literally
yet.
One-stop shop at Instagram. I got outdated on TikTok. So
yeah. If I'm honest with you, since we've joined TikTok, I do feel a little bit out of place on that platform.
It's Gen Z, man. It's Gen Z.
Yeah, I don't know what I'm doing on there, but hey, we've got some followers, so you stick to it. Henry, mate, this has been an absolute pleasure learning about your career and everything and your Olympic experiences. Best of luck with everything moving forward, and LA, Brisbane and beyond, we wish you all the best of luck, and we can get you back on after those with a couple of gold medals around your neck.
That's the idea. That is the goal.